Right. Before we go any further, I need a couple of volunteers. I need to borrow some children whose parents are here. You can come. Okay, you can come. And you, okay. You're here. Yeah, just here, please. Now then, I've borrowed these children. Now, if you look at the story of Daniel, the first thing that happens in there is King Nebuchadnezzar went and besieged Jerusalem. Now, actually, we know exactly when this happened because we've compared the records of the kings of Judah and the kings of Israel and with the Babylonian kings. And it was in 605 BC. And the year that he besieged Jerusalem, when he started, he was the crown prince. By August of that year, he was the king because his father had died. And it seems that the king of Judah surrendered to him, and King Nebuchadnezzar took away some of the treasure from the temple, in gold and silver as tribute, and he took away some young people. Okay, so you're being taken away. Why did he do this? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One of the things is that the people he took were chosen from the leading families, the royal family, the nobility. If the Jews were going to revolt, who would lead the revolution? Anybody? That's a real question to answer. Young men, yes. And which sort of young men? Sorry, someone say. Young men from noble families, the families with power, the leaders of the people. So if he's got all those young men way off in Babylon, they can't lead a revolt. But there's something else. If I take these two and have them, keep them away, I've suddenly got a lever over their parents, haven't I? You know, you do what I want, or something unpleasant will happen to them. Yeah. So you lead a revolt, subject people, and I'll chop their heads off. You didn't know you were coming into that when you volunteered, did you? Thank you. Hang on, don't go away too fast. You don't like sweeties? Oh dear, that's a shame. Anything? Yeah. I don't know. You have to tell me. You find out. So that's what Nebuchadnezzar was up to. All right, now let's get on to some slightly more serious questions. If you hadn't twigged, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the names I mentioned at the beginning of the service, are the original names of the people we typically know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now in Daniel 1, we're told they're taken away into exile. Who can tell me what the meaning of exile is? Someone's exiled, what happens? Come on. Yes? Yes, you're taken away from your home and you're not allowed to go back. That's what it is. Well done. Come and get one. Yeah. And as you say, there's lots of questions. Let's put that there. So they're taken away. What's the difference between being exiled and being on holiday? Yeah? When you're on holiday, you can come back anytime you want. Well, at least as long as the planes are flying. Yep. Okay, come on. Or shall I throw one to you? Yeah. Right. So the Babylonians took these young men away. They were keeping them out of the way. They were holding them as hostages. What else did they do to them? And if you're wondering, have a look in Daniel 1. It does say towards the end what they did to them, or with them. done the hostage. All right, let's try this a different way. Parents, what is your experience of feeding teenagers? Lots and lots, someone said. Yeah, I would agree with that. And it doesn't matter whether they're your family or someone else's. Carol and I invited my sister to stay while she was at university, and when she left, we went through the cupboards, and I think we had 1 tin of beans and a 1-inch cube of cheese left. We had to do an emergency shop. Okay, so now think about this. You're Nebuchadnezzar. You are an absolute king. You own everything. And all the money that runs the country comes out of your treasury. What do you not want to be spending money doing? Feeding hostages. Yeah? You don't want to feed hostages. Yeah? So what did the Babylonians do? Yeah? No? Yeah, sorry, say it again. Yeah. He was rationing food. Yeah, probably not too much though, but it was something else. What did he want them to do once they'd been trained? No, not as slaves, but they wanted to use them, yes. No, not farm. Okay, I'll give you a clue. He wanted them to serve in the royal court. He needed civil servants. He needed people who would be the governors, people who would be advisors, diplomats, and people who would be wise men. Because, they were a pagan lot, the Babylonians. They went in for all sorts of things. Things like magicians who were primarily interpreters of dreams, and people they called enchanters. They were the one who used to interpret dreams or interpret and defend against omens. So if you got a bad omen, the enchanter would come and tell you what to do to make sure the bad omen didn't lead to mischief. And by training the Jewish hostages to be useful members of society, from the Babylonian point of view, first of all, they could earn their living. So the rations were effectively pay. And it gave him people to do. But it also did something else. What else did it do? If those Jewish boys were working for the king in his civil servants, what was that doing to them? What was it making them? Babylonians. Yeah, it was bringing them into the culture of Babylon. So again, if you're people who are potentially rebellious servants because you've conquered them, start becoming part of your society, if they start having they've got a vested interest in your society, they're less likely to revolt. It's all about security. And Nebuchadnezzar keeping his cash where he liked it, in his pocket. Okay, I need another couple of volunteers, please. Someone different. Yeah, come on. Yes. Right. Now, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were introduced into Babylonian service, and they were put into the charge of a Babylonian official to look after them. And what happened? What was the first thing he did with them? Again, if you have a look in Daniel 1, you'll find it quite near the beginning. Very first thing he did with them. New names. Yeah. Come on, children. You're letting the adults beat you with this. Surely. Hasn't the Sunday school ever done the story of Daniel? So, he gave them new names. And this wasn't particularly good for them, because Daniel became Belteshazzar, which means it's named after Bel, who was the chief god of the Babylonians. Shadrach, who means the command of Aku, who was the moon god. And Meshach means belong to Aku. And Abednego means the servant of Nebo, who was the god of writing, wisdom, and vegetation. I'm not sure how writing, wisdom, and vegetation go together, but that was apparently the reason. So how do you think they felt about it? In fact, let's ask these ones, because I'm going to give you new names. So you're going to be Bill, you're going to be Jill, and you're going to be Fred. Do you like those names?
No.
Why not?
Yeah.
You do? Okay, so you like being called Jill. Worry about this one. So why don't you like being called Bill? Why not? It's a perfectly good boy's name. Thank you, yes. That was the thing. They were all Babylonian names supporting the gods of Babylon. How do you think Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah felt about that? Suddenly being landed with this name that everybody called you, which represented a God that you didn't believe in, a God you didn't worship, and that actually you didn't want to worship because you worship the true God. Think that was nice or not? No. Okay, there's always one. Thank you very much. Some more. Yeah. Come on, just quickly. Right. So, again, the Babylonians were trying to overwrite these men's Jewish heritage, make them part of Babylonian culture. Okay, then the king's food. Manuel mentioned that earlier. It's not what the king was eating. They weren't sitting with the king having dinner. But it was rations. They were given food from the royal storerooms. So why did the Jewish friends not want to eat the king's food? What was wrong with it from their point of view? Come on, children. It's there. Sorry? It might well have been sacrificed to the Babylonian gods, yes, and therefore it wasn't right for them to eat it because they were Jewish. There was another thing with it as well. What do you know about Jewish eating? What won't Jews eat? Anything that's not kosher, pork, etc. Yeah, I'm missing. Jumped up a few here. Okay, doesn't show very well there, but there's a pig's head in the middle of that. I'm not sure I'd fancy eating a pig's head, to be honest, but yeah, it wasn't meeting Jewish dietary laws, and it probably came from temples where it had been offered to Babylonian gods. In other words, it was defiled, and they didn't want to defile themselves by eating it. They wanted to keep themselves pure. Okay, now the most important question here. When did they decide that they were going to take their stand? Was it after a week of eating the king's food? After a month of eating the king's food? Or before they'd eaten the king's food? Come on, I'll give you a clue. 3 options. Who thinks it was after a week? Anyone think it was after a month? Someone said before. Who said before? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was before. As soon as they could. They knew they couldn't go along with the Babylonian command and then later change what they did. They were either loyal to God and his law now, or effectively they were sliding down into becoming Babylonians. Okay. So, what does this mean for us? Well, Ephesians 2:19 tells us that if we've accepted Jesus as our Lord, we're no longer strangers and aliens in God's kingdom. We're citizens with the saints and members of the household of God. What does that mean? It means as Christians, we are exiles here on earth. We're here, we'd rather be in heaven. Our home, though, is with God. And just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we need to make our stand for Jesus right from the go. Every time we go into a new situation, we can't just sit and see how the land lies, and then obey Jesus when we think it won't cause us any problems. Obedience to God's word is all or nothing. James tells us this in James 2:10 and 11. He said, whoever keeps the whole law but fails in one point has become accountable for all of it. The ones who said, you shan't commit adultery, also said, you shall not murder. So if you don't commit adultery, but if you murder, you've become a transgressor of the law. Equally, you could say, if you go at 40 and a 30 limit, you've broken the law just as badly as if you go out and bash someone over the head and rob them. If we are seen as Christians living in a way that doesn't match what we've said is our belief in Jesus, we devalue our witness for those around us. And just like the Babylonians wanted to assimilate Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, to turn them into Babylonians, a bit like the Borg in Star Trek, Satan seeks to assimilate us into the world too. So we need to ensure we stick to God's principles and commands for us, just as the three friends held to God's law. As Paul put it in Romans 12:2, don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds so you can discern what the will of God is, what is good and acceptable and perfect. But standing up for Jesus, doing what is right in a hostile world, sometimes it isn't easy. And we'll see that in a while. Yeah, come on. Right. Actually, I probably should have said 4 volunteers. You can use a tape measure. Right. So let's stand up. Right. You need to come this way a bit, and you need to go that way a bit. Keep going. Come on. Can you hold the end of the tape, please? Thank you. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. That's it. You're there. About. That's how wide it was. Okay. 9 feet. Now, it was 90 feet tall. Okay, so would it fit in here? Would it fit in this room? There you go. Too tall? Yeah, how high do you think that the highest point of the ceiling here is? It's actually 9.5 meters. So you see where the white smoke detector is? Up there? That's 9.5 meters. Because I measured it during the week. All right, how about from the back of the church, or the front of the church to the back of the church? Would it fit that way if we laid it down? No? Okay, let's see if you're right. So, there's a tape for you two, and there's a tape for you two. What I want you to do, if you come on this side, because you're away from the band instruments, measure how long the church is from that wall all the way to the back. Say you've got 5 meters on those tapes, so you might have to do it several times. We'll leave them doing that for a minute. You've reached the end of the tape. Yeah, so it was a lot longer. You can't pull it anymore. Okay, perhaps we'll cheat and we'll do it the easy way, shall we? If I put this here, and if you look at the back, you see that red dot? Are you going to be able to tell me how big it is? All right. It's not a race. Okay. You've broken my tape. Thank you. Where's the other one? Okay, thank you. You know where the sweets are? Come on. Just mind the wires. Okay, they're not having the sweet. Fine. So, the room is actually, yeah, I did say, the room is 15.4 meters from wall to wall. So even that's not big enough to get this statue in, because it was 30 meters. It would actually go there and back twice. Now, reality is, it almost certainly wasn't a single figure 90 feet tall from foot to head, because it just wouldn't stand up. It would bend in the middle. So there's probably a big plinth underneath with the statue on top. All right, what was it a statue of? It was made of gold, yes, but what was it an image of? It doesn't actually say in there, in the Bible, but actually it was probably Nebuchadnezzar himself. They use it quite often, things like that. Okay, so now the difficult question. Why did Nebuchadnezzar build the statue? Sorry, you wanted to? He worshipped himself. Possibly. I mean, it's not, maybe not quite like that, but there was a possibility. That was why he built it. We'll talk about that in a second. Why else might he have made it? What happened in Daniel 2? Remember Nebuchadnezzar's dream? What was his dream? Okay, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream about a statue with a golden head, a silver chest, bronze in the middle, iron at the bottom, and then iron and clay feet for different empires. Yeah? So it's possible, yes, that because Daniel interpreted that dream as the different empires, and the gold head was Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire, it's possible that that made him proud, and he decided, I'm going to have a statue of me because I'm the greatest. Yeah? It's either that, or he was worried because the interpretation of the statue was that the kingdom of Babylon wasn't going to last very long. And it didn't, because in his grandson's time, which is Belshazzar, Belshazzar's feast, the writing on the wall, that was when the Babylonian Empire fell and the Medes and Persians took over. So he might have been worried and was trying to get the loyalty of his subjects. So you build a statue, you get them to come and bow down, and then and basically it's like the Roman emperors wanted you to burn incense to them to prove you were loyal to the Roman Empire. So how did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego respond to the king's command? Did they do it? No, they didn't. They knew that they couldn't bow down and worship the image without breaking God's law, because it would, if nothing else, it would break the first and the second commandments in one go. And even knowing the penalty, right, even knowing the penalty, the fiery furnace, they were prepared to defy the king in this matter, and they did. So then the fortune tellers came along and snitched, and whispered in the king's ear, there's these people out there who aren't doing what you told them to. What did they accuse Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego of doing? Yeah. Not of bending down, not bending down to the statue. But everyone else is doing it. You imagine the scene. There's a plane full of people. When everyone bows down, there's 3 of them standing there. Yeah. He told them that. But they went further. They stated that the men were Jews. Well, that was true. But the way they did it was that not only were they refusing to obey, but they were being disloyal to the king because they were foreigners. And they were also implying, because what is the second thing they said about them? That, they're Jews and they are men from the king's service, many promoted, yeah? They were implying that the men were ungrateful that the king had promoted them personally to high positions. In other words, what those fortune tellers were doing was trying to make Nebuchadnezzar feel that they were ungrateful, disloyal, disrespectful, and basically make him cross. And how did Nebuchadnezzar react? Yeah. He got into a violent rage. Yeah, it worked. They were cross. He was very cross, in fact. So, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego stood firm in their faith in obedience to God. And the key verse in the whole of Daniel 3, to my mind, is this one. O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to present a defense to you in this matter. In other words, we're not going to try. We're not going to say we didn't do it, because we did. If our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. Okay? Again, this is the Church Bible translation. Basically what they're saying is, we think God can. We know physically he can save us. If he's going to save us, he will. If he's not going to save us, well, yeah. If he doesn't save us, be it known to you, O king, we still won't serve your gods, and we will not worship the golden statue that you've set up. They took their stand with confidence in God, and they recognized that while God could save them, they had no promise specifically that God would save them. Now that took courage. They were facing not just an enraged absolute ruler with the power of life and death over them, but a rather gruesome and painful manner of death that he was threatening with them. So the question for us is, are we as courageous in our faith? Jesus warned us, if we're his followers, we're going to face persecution. John 15, 20 to 21. He said, remember what I said to you. Servants are not greater than their master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also. But they will do all these things to you on account of my name, because they don't know him who sent me. Now, often, all we face in the UK when we're trying to tell someone about Jesus is ridicule, because they don't believe us, they don't want to accept it, and they'll just make fun of us, or maybe they'll call us names. But how often do we make excuses? I'm too young, I'm too old, I don't know enough to explain it, I can't speak well enough, and use that to not speak for Jesus. And if we're doing that, isn't the real reason so often we're afraid of what might follow? Or we're embarrassed by admitting that we have a faith, and we let that put us off? We need to let people know about Jesus. Their eternal future depends on it. Jesus commanded us to be his witnesses. And that's not a special few. It's not Barry. It's not people who have been called to be missionaries. It's each and every one of us who has accepted Jesus as Lord. And if we're going to let embarrassment or fear put us off now, when we don't face particular consequences for our faith, how will we cope if we ever face a real persecution? Now, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had already made a stand for their faith when they first came to Babylon. We saw that in the first section. They'd practiced their faith. They practiced their trust by making that stand in the smaller things over the food and so forth. That experience, what they had learned about God from that, enabled them to take their stand now, facing the furnace on the plain of Dura. And we need to follow their example and exercise our faith now, while we can do it without major consequences. Because the time may well come when we too need to make a stand for Jesus, when the choice is life or death. So what did their answer, the one we looked at before, what did it do to the king? Did he like it? Did he accept it? Was he happy to sit there? He got very, very cross. even more angry than he was already. Okay, so what did he order? Yeah, no. Yes, he'd done that already, but what did he order for Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego? What would they have to do? Hotter fire. Yes, they had to make the fire hotter. I think you deserve one of these because you're obviously... Right, he ordered the furnace to be made 7 times hotter. Okay. Now, why was the furnace there? Anyone have any ideas? Yeah? Yeah, that's what Nebuchadnezzar was going to use it for, but it wasn't actually there for that. Okay, remember what I said at the beginning when we talked about the size of the statue? It was 9 feet wide, 90 feet tall. It was a kiln, yeah. Bricks to make the plinth at the bottom. You would use the kiln, the furnace, to make the bricks. And the Babylonians were very fond of tiles as well. They used to use a lot of blue tiles. You can't see the blue, unfortunately, on that. But they used to make a lot of tiles, normally blue ones, and they would put those in the kiln as well to fire them, to make them shiny. So how hot would it have been normally? If it was making bricks, it would have been about 1,000 degrees centigrade. If it was making tiles, it would have been about 1,300 degrees centigrade. So how hot did Nebuchadnezzar want it? How much hotter did he say? 7 times hotter. Okay, is that possible? How hot is 7 times 1,000? Come on, someone must be good at maths here. Yeah? 7,000 degrees. Yeah? How hot is the surface of the sun? 5,600 degrees. So what do you think would have happened if the inside of the furnace had been 7,000 degrees hot? It would probably have melted. You know, that little volcano there. Okay, they couldn't realistically make it 7 times hotter. But they was as hot as they could make it. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, at this point, had made a big mistake. Because why did he want it hotter? He wanted it hotter to make the men suffer. So making the furnace hotter actually meant they would die quicker in the furnace. He needed to make it cooler to make them suffer more. Anyway, we know it was very hot. How do we know it was very hot in that furnace, or near that furnace? What happened to the soldiers? The soldiers died, yeah. These weren't common or garden soldiers. They certainly weren't. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of the average North Korean soldier. He's about that high. You know, his rifle's 4 times as big as he is, and he's skinny. No, they wasn't like that. These were Nebuchadnezzar's bodyguards. And he chose the strongest of his bodyguard to tie these men up and throw them in the furnace. And his bodyguard would be the toughest soldiers in his army. So it was hot. And if you remember the picture of the furnace, you had the door at the front where you'd take whatever you wanted to fire in and then take it out afterwards. And at the top there was a sort of chimney. That's where you would put fuel in. And it's likely it was that bit at the top that they carted the 3 men up and chucked them in to get them in the heat. So everyone watching, yeah, seeing that, thought that was it. 3 men in the fire. It's killed the soldiers. They're dead. End of story. We can all go home. Well, don't stay seated. Stay seated. Yeah. What actually happened? Someone else? Yeah, no, you probably know the answers. Yeah. There's someone behind you. Yeah, they were walking around in the furnace, and there were 4 people. Yeah. Nebuchadnezzar saw 4 men walking in the furnace, and he couldn't believe his eyes. And when he called the men out, yeah, always a choice with that. Yeah, he saw four men walking around in the furnace, and he called them out. And what was particularly significant when they came out? What did they notice about them? Yeah, they had no scorching. Their clothes were intact. They didn't smell of smoke. Basically, God had protected them completely from the king's anger. And God had been there with them in the furnace. That was the fourth man. So, do you remember what Di read to us? What did Nebuchadnezzar say about what he was going to do to the men? Who is the God that can deliver you out of my hands? You're in my power. I can do what I like. Your God's not strong enough to save me. Well, now he had an answer. The God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was the God that would deliver them out of Nebuchadnezzar's hand. And Nebuchadnezzar recognized this publicly in his proclamation, which you can see in verses 28 and 29 of Daniel 3, where he said, no one's going to say a thing about the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And it was part of Nebuchadnezzar's journey to knowing God himself. If you go back to Daniel 2, he let Daniel make offerings to him, and he praised him. Now he said this. We see the final part of the story in Daniel 4. Don't worry, we're not going there. It's not Nebuchadnezzar this week, it's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So those three friends had decided whatever their fate, they would obey and trust God, and God saved them. Now hopefully we'll never have to face a choice like they did and face death for being obedient to Jesus. But we can be sure that the God who saved Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is with us. He may not save us from physical suffering or death, but if he doesn't, it's because he has a better plan. Think how many Christians over the years have been killed for their faith, but their death has been a witness that has spread the gospel even further, and it's brought people to obey and trust Jesus. And even if we die in Jesus' service, we know that he has saved us from eternal death, from hell, and we're going to be with him for eternity. In John 10, 27 and 28, Jesus promised, my sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me. I give them eternal life and they will never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. It's that knowledge, that trust in Jesus' promise that has enabled so many Christians over the years to face hardships, difficulties, suffering, and even death in his service. It's confidence in that promise that should enable all of us, any of us, to stand up for Jesus anywhere and everywhere. Doesn't matter what age we are or anything else, we can be obedient. To be obedient to him no matter what our circumstances, just as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. And that's the key lesson from Daniel 3. God is trustworthy. We can rely on him.